The first thing that I would like to say is that I'm not an Islamic scholar. I am just a student of Islam. So, the topic that I have chosen to speak on is Islam and the West. So, I'll be touching on certain issues very briefly about this topic. So, the narrative that is dominant in the West is that Islam is an obstacle to modernization, and Muslims are considered as people who cannot integrate with Western societies. And Europeans and even Americans think that Muslims are fundamentally different, and they seek to make the whole of Europe and the United States like them. So, I would like to begin by trying to understand how at all there is a Muslim population in Europe and in the United States. I'll be only talking about Europe here. So there are about 19 million Muslims at present in Europe, and that makes the entire population in percentage 4%. The Muslims are 4% of the entire European population. And six countries of Europe: Germany, France, Great Britain, the Netherlands, and Greece contain the maximum population of Muslims, about 4 to 7%. And these European Muslims come from diverse backgrounds. You'll have Arabs, you'll have Turks, you'll have North Africans, you'll have Muslims from the Indian subcontinent. But Germany has a majority Turkish population. So, how at all did it start? Now, it started with migration of Muslims from World War II onwards. And throughout 1970s and 80s, there was a massive migration of Muslims from across the world, mainly Middle East, to Europe. And they came as laborers, and they came as as economic migrants to work in the industrial economies of the West. In Germany, in particular, during the 1980s, there was a wave of Muslim refugees from Afghanistan, Iran, and Lebanon. And very recently, you all would know, in the European migrant crisis of 2015-16, about 600,000 Syrian refugees sought asylum in Germany. Now, I'll briefly consider four issues related to Islam in the West. The first is a perception which is common among Westerners about Islam, is that Islam is resistant to secularization. Now, we all know that Europe underwent an entire process of separation of the church and the state. It's called the Enlightenment, part of the Enlightenment or the Renaissance. And it is believed that Islam is against this principle, and that politics is an essential part of religion in Islam. But I would like to clarify here a very important point, which our founder Maulana also emphasizes greatly, is that Islam differentiates between religious belief on the one hand and political system on the other hand. So religious belief contains eternal teachings such as belief in God, accountability to God, being truthful, being compassionate, having well-wishing. These are part of the creed of Islam, and they have to be followed in every situation, in every society. But as far as the political system is concerned, and it's very important, it is entirely dependent upon the situation. So if we have a society of believers and they want a government or a political system according to religion, then Islam will allow it. But if we have a mixed society and people do not want religion in political affairs, then Islam will adjust to the social will. So this differentiation between religious creed and political system is very important, because a lot of time radicalization among Muslims is because they feel political system is an essential part of their faith, and unless they establish the political system of Islam, then their faith won't be complete. But politics is not part of faith. It's totally dependent upon the situation, upon the circumstances. The second point that I want to say is that many Muslims go to the Western societies, but they maintain a strict, you all may have observed, they maintain a strict separation from the West. They don't mingle with the West. they consider the West as the other, as irreligious, as morally degenerate, as sinful. Now, Maulana has taught us, and he has been educating Muslims, that they should rise above this attitude. This is an un-Islamic attitude. Maulana says that the Islamic attitude is that Muslims should interact with the West. They should learn from the West. And there is a saying of the Prophet of Islam that wisdom and knowledge are the lost property. They are the property of a believer, and he should take it from wherever he finds it. Now, I'll give an example. Example of Maulana, our founder, what he has learned from his interactions with the West. So he has been to all of Europe, he has traveled to the United States, and he has learned a lot from his interactions with Western people. One of the very important principles which he regularly quotes is the principle of dissent and freedom of conscience, freedom of expression. Dissent and freedom of expression. So dissent means that I may have an opinion, but I give you the total freedom to hold an opposite opinion. So Maulana says that this tolerant way of thinking is very unique to the West, and Muslims must adopt this model. So how should they adopt this model? For example, many Muslims believe that apostasy or going back on Islam is a punishable crime, or blasphemy, abusing the Prophet, is a punishable crime. But our founder says that apostasy and blasphemy should be considered as a case of dissent and freedom of expression of the person concerned. We should not run to kill an apostate or kill a person who abuses the Prophet. And this free thought, if you read the Quran, is actually all over the Quran. This free thinking, free thought. Muslims need to rediscover it, and I think West is the best source of rediscovering this lost principle of the Quran. Moreover, we must know that the West is a great benefactor for the Muslims, because all the scientific and technological developments have taken place in the West, and Muslims across the world utilize these technologies and developments. So we should be filled with gratitude for the West for giving us such technology. And personally, for me, what stands out in the West is that I am a science student. I was a science student, and I want to understand the universe, to know God. And all books on popular science, on the phenomena of nature, the phenomena of universe, have been written by Western scientists, physicists, and mathematicians. So they have helped me in uplifting my faith, in discovering God at a deeper level. So I personally am very, very grateful to the West. The third point that I want to share is that the interaction of Muslims and the West is not always negative. Muslims have also developed a positive mindset through their interactions with the West. So I'll give an example that being in the West, Muslims live in a secular, democratic, pluralistic societies. Now, when they live in such democratic societies, pluralistic societies, then that helps them in a re-examination and reflection of their faith and their mindset and past beliefs. So, for example, there is a terminology which is very, very famous. We all may have heard it, which Muslims had earlier divided the world into Darul Islam and Darul Harb. I don't know if you have heard of it, but it's very famous, and it means that the world is divided between Islam and non-Islam, and Islamic country and non-Islamic country. And Muslims are perpetually in a state of war with non-Islamic countries. But when Muslims went to the West, when they lived in the West, when they interacted with the West, they realized that this division is absolutely obsolete and it needs to be abandoned. Why? Because when you live in the West, you have all the freedom to practice your religion. You have all the freedom to practice Islam. And thousands of Islamic centers, mosques, Islamic studies, university chairs attest to the fact that Muslims have the freedom to retain, practice, even preach, propagate their faith. So you can follow Islam in a supposedly non-Islamic country, So that country is not a non-Islamic, it is very much Islamic. So this re-examination of one's mindset, a reflection of one's past beliefs and ideas is something which can happen in a democratic society. I think Muslims would have not been able to discover this had they been living in a Muslim country. They had to go to a non-Muslim country and find the freedom to practice their faith there, and then discover that even a non-Muslim country can be very much open to Islam, to Muslims. So this is a very important thing, that interacting with the West, living in the West, helps in developing a universal outlook. The last point that I want to make is that in my personal interactions with Western people, I have seen that after 9/11, of course, there was an exponential rise in book sales about Islamic Jihad. But now recently I'm seeing that Islamic Jihad is not something which Western people want to know about. Many people come to me and they want to know about spirituality in Islam. They want to know about Islamic spirituality. So I want to say that in Islam, spirituality is everything in Islam. The Quran says that a true believer is one who purifies himself and transforms himself spiritually, who undergoes a spiritual transformation. So it enjoins, if you read the Quran, you will see that it is focused entirely on the individual. The individual is asked to develop a close bond with God. An individual is asked to discover God by contemplation and reflection in the universe. And an individual is asked to develop an emotional and strong bond with God. So this is what the Quran is about. It has come to make us discover our Creator, to develop closeness and love for the Creator. So there is a verse in the Quran which says that a true believer is one who loves God most. There is no such verse in the Quran which says that a true believer is one who establishes the political system of Islam, or a true believer is one who kills innocent people. A true believer is one who loves God most. So that is the purpose of life in Islam, to discover God and to do your own inner purification. And that will find us salvation in the world hereafter. Thank you.